I never imagined I'd find myself in a situation like this, but here we are. Let me tell you how it all started because, honestly, the whole thing is so bizarre that sometimes I wonder if I'm living in a sitcom instead of real life. When Karen moved in next door 6 months ago, she seemed nice enough, at least on the surface. She baked cookies for her housewarming party and brought over a plate with a cheerful smile. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she said brightly, complimenting my garden and even asking for tips on keeping her own yard looking good. At the time, I thought, okay, maybe this will be great. Maybe Karen will be one of those neighbors who brings casseroles during holidays or helps shovel snow. Boy, was I wrong. It all began innocently enough, or at least as innocent as something like this could start. One Saturday morning, I stepped outside to grab the newspaper and froze mid-step. There, lounging in my hot tub like she owned the place, was Karen. Yes, Karen. My neighbor. In my backyard. Sitting in my hot tub. And not just sitting quietly either. She had a glass of champagne in hand and looked utterly relaxed, like she belonged there. "Good morning," she called out, waving at me as though nothing unusual was happening. Her voice was chipper, almost proud, like she expected me to join her for a soak. Was this some kind of prank? Had cameras been hidden somewhere? I blinked a few times, trying to process what I was seeing. Finally, I managed to stammer, "Karen, what are you doing?" "Oh, don't worry," she replied breezily, taking another sip of her drink. "I didn't want to bother you since you weren't using it. Your hot tub is amazing. By the way, you really should take advantage of it more often." My mind raced. Not only had she trespassed onto my property, but she also acted like she was doing me a favor by using something that very clearly belonged to me. Who does that? I mean, seriously, who walks into someone else's backyard and decides to make themselves comfortable without permission? I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Karen," I said firmly, "this is private property. You can't just use my hot tub whenever you feel like it." She tilted her head slightly, still smiling. "Oh, come on. It's no big deal. Think of it as sharing the neighborhood spirit." Sharing. Really? Since when does neighborhood spirit involve breaking into someone's backyard and helping yourself to their belongings? Reluctantly, I told her again that she needed to leave, and after a moment of hesitation, she climbed out of the hot tub, wrapped herself in a towel, and headed back toward her house. As she walked away, she gave me a little wave and said, "See you later, neighbor." Like everything was perfectly normal, like she hadn't just crossed every boundary imaginable. That should have been the end of it, right? Wrong. Over the following weeks, strange things kept happening. I'd notice footprints near the hot tub or hear faint splashing sounds late at night. At first, I thought I was imagining things, but then I caught her red-handed. Again. Each time, she'd shrug it off like it was no big deal. "You're always working," she'd say. "I figured you wouldn't mind if I used it while you were busy." Mind? Of course I minded. Looking back, I realize now that Karen wasn't just being thoughtless. She was testing me, testing how far she could push before I snapped. Little did I know, this was only the beginning of a much bigger headache, and trust me, it gets worse. After that first hot tub incident, I really thought Karen would get the hint. I mean, how could she not? I'd been clear, firm, even, that she couldn't just waltz into my backyard and use my things whenever she felt like it. But no, Karen wasn't the kind of person who backed down easily. In fact, if anything, she seemed to take my protests as a challenge. And that's when things started spiraling out of control. A few weeks later, I came home late one Friday night after a long day at work. The house was quiet, and I was looking forward to unwinding with a cup of tea and maybe binge-watching something mindless on TV. But as soon as I pulled into the driveway, I knew something was off. There was music playing, loud music, and it wasn't coming from Karen's house. It was coming from mine. I crept around the side of the house, heart pounding, half expecting to find burglars or some kind of wild animal tearing through the yard. What I found instead was a party. A full-blown, no-holds-barred backyard bash. Twinkle lights were strung up between my trees, people were dancing near the pool, and someone, I kid you not, was floating lazily in the hot tub. Again. "What is going on?" I shouted, storming into the chaos. Heads turned, and for a moment, there was an awkward silence. Then Karen appeared, holding a drink in one hand and a plate of snacks in the other. She looked completely unfazed, like this was the most normal thing in the world. "Oh, hey, neighbor," she said cheerfully, as if we were meeting at a coffee shop, instead of her throwing a party in my backyard without permission. "Hope you don't mind. We're celebrating Ashley's promotion." Ashley, who even asterisk was asterisk Ashley. I scanned the crowd, trying to figure out which one of these strangers was Ashley, but honestly, I didn't care. None of them belonged here. This was asterisk my asterisk property, asterisk my asterisk backyard, and asterisk my asterisk hot tub they were using like it was their personal resort. "I do mind," I snapped, my voice rising over the music. "This is private property. Get everyone out of here. Now." Karen blinked, clearly surprised by my reaction. "Oh, come on," she said, laughing nervously. "It's just a little fun. You're always so busy. You barely use this space anyway. We're practically doing you a favor by keeping it lively." A favor? Was she serious right now? My lawn looked trampled. There were red Solo cups scattered everywhere, and someone had spilled what smelled like barbecue sauce on my patio furniture. This wasn't a favor, it was a disaster. To her credit, Karen did manage to round up the partygoers pretty quickly after that. They filed past me, some mumbling apologies, others giving me dirty looks like asterisk I asterisk was the unreasonable one for interrupting their unauthorized shindig. One guy even muttered, "Lighten up," as he walked by. Lighten up, on my own property. Once the crowd had cleared, Karen lingered behind, still clutching her drink. "Look," she said, attempting to sound conciliatory. "I'm sorry if you feel upset. I was just trying to help. Your backyard is such a great space. It deserves to be enjoyed." "By me," I shot back. "Not by you and your random friends. Next time, ask permission before inviting people over to someone else's house." She rolled her eyes slightly, like I was being overly dramatic, but finally nodded. "Fine, fine. Lesson learned." But deep down, I knew better. This wasn't the end. Karen didn't strike me as the type to admit defeat, and I had a sinking feeling that this was only the beginning of whatever scheme she had planned next. And honestly, I wasn't wrong. Things were about to get a whole lot worse. After the backyard party fiasco, I thought Karen might finally understand that her behavior was unacceptable. I mean, how many times did I have to tell her no before she got the message? But instead of learning her lesson, Karen seemed to double down. It was like every time I set a boundary, she found a way to push it further, testing just how much I could take before I snapped. Not long after the party incident, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I installed security cameras around my property and put up a big sign near the gate that read, "Asterisk asterisk, private property. Trespassers will be prosecuted." Asterisk asterisk, surely this would send a clear message. No more sneaking into my hot tub, no more unauthorized parties. End of story. Or so I thought. One Friday night, about a week later, I came home late from running errands. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed something strange. The faint glow of lights coming from the backyard. My stomach sank. Not again. I parked the car and crept around the side of the house, bracing myself for whatever absurdity awaited me. Sure enough, there was Karen, standing in the middle of my yard with two of her friends, setting up speakers and unloading a cooler full of drinks. The nerve of this woman. "What are you doing?" I demanded, storming toward them. My voice echoed through the quiet neighborhood, loud enough to startle a raccoon rummaging through the bushes. Karen spun around, looking caught off guard, but not the least bit guilty. "Oh, hi," she said, flashing that same overly sweet smile she always used when she was up to something. "We were just borrowing the space for a little yoga session. Isn't it peaceful back here?" Yoga? At midnight, with a cooler full of beer. This woman had an answer for everything, no matter how ridiculous it sounded. "This is private property," I said firmly, pointing at the sign I'd put up specifically for moments like this. "You're trespassing." Again. Karen crossed her arms, feigning offense. "You know, you really need to lighten up. You act like we're criminals or something. We're just trying to enjoy ourselves. On my property." I shot back, without asking permission. "That's called trespassing, Karen. And if you don't believe right now, I'm calling the police." For a moment, she looked genuinely shocked, as if she couldn't believe I'd actually follow through on my threat. Then her expression shifted to one of annoyance. She muttered something under her breath that sounded suspiciously like buzzkill before turning to her friends. "Fine, let's go," she said curtly. They packed up their stuff and left, leaving behind a trail of footprints on my freshly mowed grass. As they walked away, Karen turned back briefly and gave me a tight-lipped smile. "You'll regret this," she said cryptically. "You can't keep everyone out forever." Her words lingered in my mind long after she disappeared into the darkness. What did she mean by that? Was she planning something bigger? Or was she just trying to intimidate me? The next morning, I woke up feeling uneasy. When I went outside to check the backyard, I noticed small things. A few empty soda cans tucked under the patio table, a patch of flattened grass, where they must have set up the speakers. It wasn't major damage, but it was symbolic. Karen wasn't backing down. She was escalating. Every time I drew a line, she stepped over it and made sure I knew it. That's when I realized something important. Karen didn't care about rules or boundaries. To her, these weren't issues of respect or ownership. They were challenges. And the harder I pushed back, the more determined she became to prove she could win. But why? Why was she so obsessed with my backyard? Was it jealousy? Boredom? Some misplaced sense of entitlement? Whatever the reason, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't going to end anytime soon. If anything, Karen was just getting started. And honestly, I had no idea what she'd do next, but I was pretty sure it wouldn't be good. If I thought Karen was going to back off after I threatened to call the police, I couldn't have been more wrong. In fact, she seemed to take it as a personal challenge, a declaration of war, even. And let me tell you, when Karen decided to retaliate, she didn't hold back. It started subtly enough, at least at first. One morning, I woke up to an odd smell wafting through my house. At first, I thought it might be coming from outside, maybe garbage day or something like that. But as the days went on, the smell grew stronger and stranger. It wasn't sewer gas or rotting food. It smelled like burnt popcorn. Burnt popcorn mixed with clinging supplies. Every time I opened a window or turned on a fan, the scent lingered stubbornly, refusing to fade. Then there were the noises. Loud, obnoxious vacuuming sounds rattled through the walls at all hours of the day, and sometimes late into the night. Not your average, "I'm tidying up" kind of vacuuming either. This was full-on industrial-strength noise, like someone was trying to suck up every speck of dust in existence. It wasn't constant, but it happened often enough that it felt deliberate. Like Karen knew exactly when I'd be home and how much it would bother me. When I finally confronted her about it, she acted completely innocent. As usual. "Oh, sorry about that," she said sweetly, batting her eyelashes like she hadn't a clue what I was talking about. "Must be the new air purifier I bought. Isn't technology amazing?" An air purifier. Really? That explained the weird smell. Maybe, but not the deafening vacuum cleaner symphony keeping me awake at night. Still, I didn't have proof, so all I could do was glare at her while she smiled smugly. Clearly, this was her way of getting under my skin without technically breaking any rules. But Karen didn't stop there. Oh no, she had more tricks up her sleeve. A few days later, I came out of my house to find her car parked directly in front of my driveway. Not partially blocking it, completely blocking it. There was no way I could get my car out without asking her to move hers first. When I knocked on her door to ask what was going on, she shrugged and said, "Oops, guess I didn't realize where I was parking. My bad." My bad? Please, this wasn't an accident, it was sabotage. Over the next week, it became a pattern. Every time I needed to leave the house, her car magically appeared right where it would cause the most inconvenience. Sometimes she'd leave notes on my windshield pretending it was a mistake. "So sorry. Didn't mean to block you again." But the sarcastic tone made it clear she was enjoying every second of this game. At this point, I was losing sleep over Karen drama. She wasn't just annoying anymore. She was exhausting. How could one person be so relentless? It felt like living in a never-ending episode of some twisted reality show where the villain always stayed 2 steps ahead. And honestly, I started questioning myself. Was I being too harsh? Should I have ignored the trespassing incidents and let her use the hot tub whenever she wanted? Maybe then she wouldn't feel the need to retaliate like this. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. Giving in to Karen wouldn't solve anything. It would only encourage her to push harder, demand more. People like Karen don't respect boundaries unless you enforce them firmly. Still, I couldn't keep living like this. Something had to give. The question was, what? Calling the police hadn't worked before, and involving the HOA felt like a long shot. Sooner or later, I realized I'd have to take matters into my own hands. Because if Karen thought she could wear me down, she was dead wrong. Little did I know, though, that Karen's antics were far from over. If anything, she was just warming up. And trust me, her next move would make everything else seem tame by comparison. By this point, I was at my wits' end. Karen's antics had gone from irritating to downright unbearable. The constant noise, the blocked driveway, the lingering smells, it felt like she was determined to make my life as miserable as possible. And honestly, it was working. I couldn't remember the last time I'd slept through the night or spent a day without feeling on edge, waiting for her next move. Something had to change. Desperate for support, I decided to reach out to other neighbors. Maybe they'd dealt with Karen before and could offer advice, or better yet, back me up if things escalated further. I started casually mentioning Karen's behavior during small talk, testing the waters to see if anyone else had experienced similar issues. To my surprise, they had plenty of stories. One neighbor, Tom, told me about how Karen once tried to redecorate his living room while he was at work. Apparently, she walked in uninvited, moved his furniture around, and even replaced his throw pillows with ones she brought from her own house. She said it needed feng shui, Tom explained, shaking his head. I didn't know whether to laugh or call the cops. Another neighbor, Lisa, shared that Karen threw a wedding shower in her garage last year, without permission. She claimed it was an emergency, Lisa said, but when I asked whose wedding it was for, she couldn't even give me a name. The more people I talked to, the clearer it became. Karen wasn't just targeting me. She had a history of inserting herself into others' lives and spaces, always acting like she was doing them a favor. Whether it was borrowing tools without asking, hosting events on their property, or rearranging their belongings, Karen treated the entire neighborhood like her personal playground. Armed with these testimonials, I decided to take action. First, I sent a formal complaint to our homeowners association, HOA, attaching video evidence of Karen trespassing in my backyard and detailed accounts of her behavior. I included screenshots of text messages where she blatantly admitted to parking in front of my driveway on purpose. To my relief, the HOA promised to investigate, though I wasn't holding my breath. They were notoriously slow to act. In the meantime, I took matters into my own hands. I installed motion-activated floodlights and sprinklers around the perimeter of my yard. If Karen thought sneaking into my backyard under cover of darkness was still an option, she was in for a rude awakening. Let's see how much she liked getting drenched at 2 a.m. while trying to climb into my hot tub. But Karen wasn't done fighting back. One evening, I heard splashing sounds coming from the backyard again. Rushing outside, I flipped on the floodlights, and there she was, standing in the hot tub once more. Except this time, she was soaking wet, holding a bottle of wine like it was some kind of trophy. "What is wrong with you?" I yelled, incredulous. Karen glared at me, water dripping from her hair. "You think you're so perfect, don't you?" she spat. "Always hoarding your stuff, refusing to share." "Share, share," I shouted back. "This isn't sharing, it's trespassing. Get out of my yard." For a moment, we stood there glaring at each other, neither willing to back down. Finally, Karen stomped away, leaving soggy footprints across my patio. But as angry as I was, I couldn't help but feel a flicker of satisfaction. For the first time, Karen looked genuinely frustrated, not smug or amused like usual. Maybe, just maybe, I was finally getting through to her. Still, I knew this battle wasn't over. Even with the HOA involved and my new security measures in place, Karen wasn't the type to give up easily. If anything, she was probably already plotting her next move, and honestly, I didn't know how much longer I could keep playing defense. Sooner or later, I'd need a plan, a real one, to put an end to this madness once and for all. The showdown with Karen had been brewing for months, but nothing could have prepared me for the chaos that unfolded one particularly unforgettable night. It was late, way past midnight, and I was just about to drift off to sleep when I heard it. The unmistakable sound of splashing coming from my backyard. My heart sank. Not again. I grabbed a flashlight and stormed outside, flipping on the motion-activated floodlights as soon as I stepped onto the patio. The scene before me was almost comical, if it weren't so infuriating. There was Karen, standing waist-deep in my hot tub, drenched from head to toe, clutching a bottle of wine like it was some kind of prize. Her hair clung to her face, mascara streaked down her cheeks, and her expression was equal parts defiance and disbelief. "What is wrong with you?" I shouted, my voice echoing into the quiet night. "Are you serious right now?" Karen glared at me, water dripping steadily from her clothes. Instead of looking embarrassed or guilty, she looked angry. Really angry. "You think you're better than everyone else, don't you?" she snapped, pointing the neck of the wine bottle at me like it was a weapon. "Always hoarding your stuff, refusing to share." "Share?" I screeched, incredulous. "This isn't sharing. It's breaking and enturing. Get out of my yard." For a moment, we just stood there, staring each other down. Karen's chest heaved with frustration, and I could see the wheels turning in her head, trying to come up with another excuse, or maybe a way to justify what she was doing. But this time, I wasn't backing down. This wasn't just about the hot tub anymore. It was about respect. Respect for boundaries, for property, for basic human decency. Finally, Karen let out an exaggerated huff and climbed out of the hot tub, leaving behind a trail of wet footprints across my patio. She didn't apologize or even acknowledge how ridiculous she looked. Instead, she grabbed her towel, wrapped it around herself, and stomped toward her house, muttering under her breath the whole way. As she disappeared into the darkness, I couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. Relief, mostly, that I'd finally drawn a line she couldn't cross, but also exhaustion. This constant battle with Karen was draining me emotionally and mentally. When would it end? Would it ever? The next morning, I woke up feeling uneasy. Despite the confrontation, I knew Karen wasn't the type to admit defeat easily. Sure enough, later that day, I noticed something strange near my mailbox, a handwritten note tucked inside. At first glance, it seemed innocent enough, but as I unfolded it, my stomach dropped. It read, ****, you'll regret crossing me. ***. My hands trembled as I stared at the words. Was this a threat? A warning? Or just another one of Karen's dramatic attempts to intimidate me? Either way, it sent a chill down my spine. For the first time, I started questioning whether this feud had gone too far. What if she decided to escalate things further? What if she retaliated in ways I couldn't predict? Determined not to let fear take over, I marched straight to the HOA office and handed them a copy of the note along with all the evidence I'd gathered so far. Videos, photos, witness statements from other neighbors. They'd promised to issue Karen a formal warning, though their tone suggested they were still treating this like a minor nuisance rather than the serious issue it had become. In the days that followed, Karen kept her distance. For a while, at least. No more sneaking into my backyard. No more loud noises or blocked driveways. But every time I saw her walking her dog or watering her plants, she shot me a glare that said everything her words didn't. This wasn't over. Looking back, I realized something important about Karen and people like her. She thrived on conflict, feeding off the drama and attention it brought her. The more I resisted, the more she pushed back, determined to prove she was right, even when she clearly wasn't. And while I hated to admit it, part of me wondered if I'd unintentionally fueled her behavior by engaging in this endless tug-of-war. Still, I refused to give up. My home was supposed to be a sanctuary, a place where I felt safe and relaxed, not stressed and on edge. If standing my ground meant enduring a few more weeks or months of tension, then so be it. Because deep down, I knew one thing for certain. Karen might win battles, but she wouldn't win the war. Not if I had anything to say about it. Weeks passed after the showdown in my backyard, and for a while things seemed quieter. Karen stopped sneaking into my yard, didn't throw any more parties, and even parked her car properly instead of blocking my driveway. At first, I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd finally gotten the message. Maybe she'd realized how far she'd gone and decided to back off for good. But anyone who knows Karen knows that backing off isn't really in her vocabulary. She wasn't done. It was just a temporary ceasefire. And honestly, I think she knew better than to push too hard now that the HOA was officially involved. The formal warning they issued must have rattled her enough to make her tread carefully, at least for a little while. Still, life didn't go back to normal. Not completely. Every time I saw Karen walking her dog or chatting with other neighbors, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was watching me. Waiting. Her smiles were tight-lipped, her waves half-hearted, as if she were biding her time until she could strike again. It was exhausting, living in this state of low-grade paranoia, wondering when the next shoe would drop. One evening, I sat on my porch sipping tea, trying to enjoy the peace and quiet I'd fought so hard for. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I found myself reflecting on everything that had happened. This bizarre feud with Karen had taught me a lot about boundaries, resilience, and standing up for myself, even when it felt like no one else understood what I was going through. I also learned something unexpected. I wasn't alone. After speaking out about Karen's behavior, several neighbors reached out to share their own stories and their gratitude that someone had finally stood up to her. Some offered advice, others simply expressed solidarity. One family even invited me over for dinner, saying they admired how I handled the situation. That support meant more to me than I can put into words. For the first time in months, I felt like I had allies, not just opponents. As for Karen, well, she eventually moved on, to greener pastures, apparently. About 6 months later, a moving truck pulled up outside her house, and within a week, new neighbors had moved in. A young couple with 2 kids and a golden retriever. They seemed nice enough, though I made sure to introduce myself early on and set some friendly but firm ground rules about shared spaces. Better safe than sorry. The HOA never fully resolved the issue with Karen, which wasn't surprising. Their investigation dragged on for months before fizzling out without much action, but in a way that didn't matter anymore. By standing my ground and refusing to back down, I'd sent a clear message, not just to Karen, but to everyone else in the neighborhood. My home is my space, and I won't tolerate being taken advantage of. Now, when I look at my backyard, I see it differently. The hot tub that once caused so much trouble has become a symbol of resilience. Sure, it's just a piece of equipment, but it represents something bigger, my determination to protect what's mine and live peacefully in my own space. These days, I use it often, relaxing under the stars with a book or music playing softly in the background. It feels like closure, a small victory in a long, frustrating battle. Would I do it all over again? Absolutely. Was it worth the stress and sleepless nights? Without a doubt. Because at the end of the day, I proved something important, not just to Karen, but to myself. Sometimes you have to fight for your peace of mind, even if it means going toe-to-toe with the most infuriating neighbor imaginable. So here's where the story ends. For now, anyway. My garden looks better than ever, my security system is top-notch, and the neighborhood feels a little less chaotic. Life isn't perfect, but it's calmer. And honestly, that's enough for me.